committees, the jurisdiction is capital bill. So we are in the Senate institutions room, and we have 3 members of the Senate and 3 members of the House. And what we will do today is hear from the administration about conditions of a certain categories. And then I think before we have a discussion on that, well, we'll ask questions about that, but then we'll also hear from the House on their package. And I think we should hear about everything first before we have a detailed discussion on what the administration, the information that they have. All right, does that sound good?
Yeah. Would we be allowed to ask questions?
Definitely, definitely. And they need to stay the whole time.
We'll be here.
Okay. Okay, great. So can the administration, yes, please.
Well, so thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to committee conference. Appreciate the work that the committee has been doing. And please solicit any other information that you'd like. I assume what would be helpful is just a bit more context on the projects that were discussed last night. Is that what you're?
Yes, exactly. Specifically the what we have been calling the 3 Bs. What we did yesterday was we combined them in bulk, was the unelegant word I was using.
Yeah.
And we had language, we agreed on language defining those projects.
Okay, so I guess, and I'll be brief because I know this meeting's got a lot of work ahead of them. I think what we just want to provide a point of clarification because things were moving fairly quickly last night to clarify that the new language as proposed by the House would be in fact a departure from the Senate position. I mean, obviously there's the consolidation of the funding from 3.1 to 2.5, which is significant. But in terms of the language, I think we were all kind of trying to work out in live time last night, everybody in this room, what the implications would be of moving to language that says municipally owned infrastructure. It's not clear to the administration what that the 3 projects that have been contemplated and that were in the Senate's bill would all meet that strict definition. We think a slight, from the administration's perspective, a tweak to say municipally supported, or I think that would be the best language just to kind of broaden and clarify that these are all projects for which there is significant municipal investment, public sector investment. There are, in many cases, in some cases, there are components that are municipally owned. In some, there are cases where the municipality is a long-term financially vested stakeholder. They have a long-term lease exceeding 20, 30 years. So there's just this nuance around municipally owned infrastructure that we wanted to clarify does narrow the list of eligibility. So that the community has their eyes wide open. If you choose to go in that direction, there may be ramifications for the projects considered.
Okay, so it's good that you made that that you had those conversations, and I appreciate you bringing it to us. So other questions?
I have a question for clarification. So for the dollars, that was our understanding, they were going to municipalities. So by saying that municipally owned is a problem, where would the dollars go?
So my understanding, and I'm sorry that my counterpart Commissioner Barrell is not here to clarify, but I don't believe that in every single case the funding was going directly to a municipality. I think, I guess I don't want to speak definitively on that. That's a point I'm not sure on. And so I think maybe the municipalities were conduits, but I'm happy to try to bring him back shortly if that's a point of clarification that the committee would like.
I mean, we'd like to know where the dollars are going. They're public dollars, so are they going to a public entity like municipality?
Yeah, they're going to these public projects. I think there's differences in each case in each of the three projects. And I just frankly, Madam Chair, myself, don't have it my.
You're a bit busy.
Yeah.
But are these gonna be municipally owned projects? I mean, we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about water and sewer. Water and sewer projects are usually municipally owned, so I don't see where the problem is.
Yeah, so
Where are the dollars going?
in some cases, I think there's municipally owned infrastructure. In some cases, I think the funding was designed to complete, like, I'll take, for instance, the Bennington project, which I understand to be a very complex project with multiple pieces in the funding stack. Again, I don't myself know exactly which component this was designed to support. I can probably get Alex down here in 5 minutes to clarify if that's helpful. I just don't want to speak on the record inaccurately. The fact is that in each case, the municipality was actively involved stakeholder. In that case, for instance, they are, I think, going to be the anchor tenant in the building with a long-term lease of some period over 30 years. And so there's this, what we see a strong public good that these projects would advance, and a strong nexus between the project and municipal benefit.
I want to springboard off of something the chair was just kind of sitting at, but before I do that, I want to push back on a premise. I just don't accept the premise that things were moving quickly last night, and that there's an insinuation there that this was slid in or deceptively slid in. And I just want to be really clear that the language we presented was really easily understood language. There's not much there for debate. So I want to be clear that we're not trying to be sneaky or below the table or anything. That regardless, but I don't think things were moving quickly last night. We were here until 6, 7 o'clock at night.
If I can clarify, Representative, I appreciate that. If I made that insinuation unwittingly, I apologize. All I meant was that I was in the room and others, we were trying to understand on our end, right? Because again, I'm sitting here, I have one altitude view of the Capitol Hill. I don't have the technical details. All I meant was that it was taking a minute for us to, any time there's a change in language, it takes a while to digest what the ramifications will be. And so I'm sitting here today just clarifying, but now that we've had a chance to talk to our program staff, to our specific people, we just wanted to provide more information. I didn't mean to insinuate that the process was in any way.
To state it clearly, I think that was a 1 sentence, maybe a 2 sentence submission.
Right.
Again, and from my perspective, it's easily understood. To the chair's point, though, how the Capitol bill has always prioritized state infrastructure, publicly owned facilities, state capital. I guess, and that's what was behind, that's the intent behind that language, that we want to make sure the Capitol bill is funding those sorts of projects. And it seems now like there's a pause here, like that's going to be a problem. So how does the administration justify the use of the Capitol bill for anything other than state-owned, municipally owned, in this case, even that's a departure, infrastructure?
So I really appreciate the question, Representative. I mean, I think there is precedent in the Capitol bill for funding that goes to exterior entities. In the building communities grant section, for instance, a number of our competitive grant programs that are in the Capitol bill do wind up outside of state or municipal or public sector investments. I would agree. I think certainly the focus is always, we give money to UVM, for instance, every year. The focus of the Capitol bill is public infrastructure. I think the focus of everything we do and this body does is public good and investment in our public, right? And as I've testified in the House Committee many times, I think our thinking to your question of how does the administration justify these investments was that these, as part of the process of reviewing a long list of housing projects that were out there, these rose to the top in a number of different buckets. One of them being that there was a lot of public investment already made in each project. they were very close to the finish line and that they had real, compelling returns on investment for the amount of state money that we could put in the project that would generate, in this case, I think it's over 500 housing units and 100 childcare slots and all of these other public goods, right? So, and I think this is maybe crux issue to this conversation about these projects. And I think we really welcome this conversation. I just want to say, because this is natural, and I think out of tension whenever you try to think in new and innovative ways about what our role as a public sector, how do we drive forward the public good? I think this space of public-private collaboration is an interesting one and really fertile, right? If you look at some of the investments the HCB has been making in recent years, they've really been leaning into some public-private partnership type models. And VHIP, which of course the administration and many in this room are fans of, there are these programs that take private investment and supplement with public dollars to be able to get things moved forward that have real benefit to Vermonters. And so I think we see these three projects as really falling into that category. And I think notably, there is a lot of public stake in these projects, and we stand by that. I don't think we would necessarily just go out onto the street and look for a developer and say, here's $1 million, what can you do for it? We very intentionally looked for projects where there were a lot of people around the table, a big chunk of the stakeholders, that sort of piece of the pie was public sector investment. And so we're starting to help leverage that. That was the question.
So who's getting the dollars? Are state dollars? Is it the stakeholder group or is it the developer?
Well, I think it depends on each project, Madam Chair. And again, I'm sorry, because I know it's not satisfying. I really just have to defer to Alex. I don't know if we can text.
So
I don't want to text while I'm in the chair. I think that's bad.
is it going to a stakeholder group? Is it going to a developer? Where the
I
state
hear the
dollars?
question again. We can certainly provide that clarification as soon as I can. Yeah, somebody can speak to it.
Okay, so I want to just be clear about my understanding of these projects. So my understanding when we were talking about these projects was that the items to be funded would be publicly owned, whether or not it was municipal or state or some other entity, but they would be publicly owned. And I fully understand that, especially in economic development, there's creative ways to do things, and I applaud creativity. Sometimes the partnerships that we have in Vermont, like VHIP, for example, before VHIP was established, part of the conversation was, is there a public good to providing direct support to private owners of property? And because VHIP was restricted initially to rehabs, that there was a public good in the community being upgraded and supported, because that benefits all of us. It benefits the immediate neighbors and the community. So there was a defined public good before the program started. Now, I do appreciate the creativity of this program, because to the extent that it is a program. The criteria weren't decided in advance, or they may have been decided by the administration, but they weren't decided by the legislature. And that is our job, is to decide how money is spent and in what ways money is spent. I'm open to having a conversation about future iterations of this, and trying to find ways to be more creative, especially with housing. Obviously, we need housing. My concern is that my assumption, which I spoke of, it wasn't a mystery, was that the funding was going to go to publicly owned infrastructure, which in itself is a diversion and a deviation from what we do in other programs. But I thought that was a good, and given that we are in a housing crisis, I thought that the mysterious process, lack of process, not lack of process, because I was reassured when I learned that you did have a process. And I think it was actually a double process. It was in the administration and in ACCD. So that's great, but it wasn't a process that was previously defined, which is something that government should do, is define the process. Because process matters. It's not just that, you know, I don't like people having to wait for things and jump through hoops. But this is public money, and public money is special because people don't have a choice on whether or not to pay it. If a shoe store decides to spend its money on something that it isn't relevant to their work, you don't have to go to that shoe store. People don't have a choice about paying their taxes. Tax money is special. So our obligation is to care for it. And that care means process, and it means criteria, and it means what you feel is right. And it doesn't feel right to send this money to private developers. And I understood that was not the goal, that the goal was to provide public infrastructure that certainly helps developers. There's definite benefit to the developers. But that's okay in this instance because of the ultimate beneficiary or owner of the thing that we would be paying for would be the public.
I to completely appreciate that. If I might,
Sure.
just briefly, I do want to just to respond to this sort of the process. I've made this point before. I think every action that the administration makes, we do in the full knowledge that, this is the governor's proposed capital budget, which goes to the legislative committees of jurisdiction to, as many people in this room are fond of pointing out, right? To closely scrutinize and make adjustments and to take public testimony. And I think in both cases, these committees, each of these two committees have taken public testimony on these three projects. They've taken public recorded testimony from the administration on the thought process through which we arrived at these three particular projects for public investment. And I think we completely hold as sacrosanct the responsibility in terms of how we are investing public dollars. I don't see personally, and I think the administration, the much difference between the process here, which was public and where it aired, and any of the other capital investments which go through the same process, right? Not everything in capital bill has a predefined set of criteria that it gets washed through. There are projects chosen, they're discussed, they're debated. The good judgment of everybody involved is brought to bear on the projects. But I think these fall loosely in the same category. That being said, I mean, I really, really appreciate the chance to have this conversation with the committee. I think we have a pretty good sense of where everybody stands in terms of thinking about these projects. I don't want to take too much of the committee's time. I know there's a lot of work ahead. I really would love to just get a final clarification from Commissioner Farrell on the recipients, because I know that's an outstanding question. We'll be here in the room and coming back. But thank you very much for your comment.
I actually just wanted to echo exactly what you said. I agree with you 100%. And as far as other grants, for example, not be vetted, or at the end project not being a state owned, we're talking about like a community grant, for example, it might be 10,000 or 15,000, way different than $1 million. At least that's my perspective. But process to me, and I think our whole side, I think probably everybody at the state, process has to matter. That's what we're elected to do, is to take care of people's money. And as soon as we let process slip, it slips hard. And next thing you know, it's a slippery slope. And so it matters to me a lot. And it's not, so.
I guess I'm confused about where we've lost the process. I have no idea where we've lost the process at all. And as far as a project like this, I guess we should just tell VHCB that they can't have any more money. It's doing the same type of thing. It's going to private enterprise before it's all said and done. VHCB does a ton of business with Rural Edge, and they're not government. I mean, we're just spending millions and millions of dollars with the rural edge. It's the same situation that we're doing right here, but it's because VHCB spending the money, or so it's all good. I don't understand two things. I don't understand where we lost the process and why we would even be hesitant about supporting a housing project that every committee in this building wishes that they could be part of. And so I really don't understand where we've lost the process.
Okay, let me answer that for you. The process, there are so many different processes, but VHCB processes, they're advertised in advance. The criteria are set in advance. The dollar amounts are set in advance. And they have, I think, 3 tranches or segments of grants a year. Folks know when those grants are. Much of their money is federal, which has many more strings on it. So they have to follow that. But the public knows in advance how the money's going to be distributed. And it's nothing is ever perfectly fair, but it's more fair and transparent than this has been. But again, I do appreciate the creativity. And if there's a way to find something that could be this flexible and reliable and open, I'd love to have that conversation. Going forward. Yeah, because obviously we can't go back in time.
We may
At least-
agree.
Right.
Yeah, to that point, this is a new precedent, and to the chair's concern, this does open up the capital bill in ways that it hasn't been used before. I hear your point that it's been used in similar ways, but this is different. And I guess I have a 2-part question. One, does the administration envision a long-term policy shift where capital dollars, possibly bonded dollars, are going to become a regular funding stream for these sorts of projects? If the answer to that is yes, do you envision the legislature playing a more formal role in that vetting process to determine which projects receive funding? Because that wasn't before. That this is, here are 3 projects we've decided, and the legislature did not have input on that. And this is a new use of the capital bill. It is absolutely a new use of the capital bill, and I'm worried about the precedent that this would set.
So I appreciate both parts of the question, Representative. And I think I recall discussing a similar question in your committee. I think as to the precedent moving forward, and this I think builds off the points just made, certainly the administration is open and interested in having discussions moving forward about how we best, this is what we do every year and what these committees do every year, how are we best investing public dollars for maximum public good. I would love to see personally next year 3 more projects, 4 more projects, right, of any stripe that move forward as many housing units and childcare slots and other public benefits as these projects do. I think, as I said in the committee a couple months ago, inevitably we can't predict what shakes out in a given cycle based on funding availability, based on competing priorities. I mean, everybody in this room knows the nature of not being able to bind the future. That being said, I mean, Chair talks about process and having a set of criteria. We're very much open to that. I think what in terms of what's moving forward, I think what's been kind of a crux question around these 3 projects in this session is that all 3 of them are very close to moving forward and are at various points of momentum and inertia. And that in fact was one of the criteria that we looked at. So to the degree that there's been kind of this urgency around, we're having this debate about these projects, I think that's part of what's driving that is, look, there's, there time is money, cost opportunities to weigh here. If money didn't, like Val's position, right, which took a big chunk of money and moved this out into the general fund, let's say the operating budget did or did not for certain projects, right, there would be real opportunity costs. I think part of where we're coming from is saying, look, we've got these 3 projects. We know all of the benefits. We know all of the returns on investment here. We're all living in this space of a housing crisis. Here is this opportunity to move these things forward. And just in terms of the process, I mean, again, I think that the debate that has occurred in this building and the input from the administration to the legislature, ultimately, I mean, this body is the one with final say, as we'll see here in a couple hours, right? This committee will pass presumably a bill that will become law. The idea that the administration crafts something that the legislature has no input on, to me, doesn't seem quite accurate, right? Since you are all at once finally writing the legislation. So again, we have put forward a proposal for funding for these three projects, which have a myriad of benefits. And there's a variety of reasons we selected those three projects. I think we've been in here at multiple points explaining those. I'm sitting here continuing to try to explain our rationale. Ultimately, the decision will be up to you. So I think it's the legislator's prerogative, as always, what happens. So I would just, I guess, respond in that way.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you have language to propose, I don't know if the
So I think we did,
others would want to consider that, but if you have language to propose, this would be a good time for it. I think we understand where we're at.
yeah, so I think the language that was presented last night says municipally owned housing infrastructure or something like that.
Yes.
Correct me. And I think we would propose shifting the language to say municipally supported housing infrastructure, which just, we believe keeps the spirit of public investment and all of these public good components we've been talking about. It provides just a little bit more flexibility that would gel with the projects under consideration.
Is municipally supported your best offer? I mean, I can't,
You're making an agreement.
municipally supported could be a letter.
That's,
But,
I think that's the language that the
Okay.
administration feels.
okay, that's, okay, cause I was thinking if you had something like, publicly owned or long-term lease,
Yeah, I think.
that might be something, I don't know.
I don't know
if they
about
would
long-term
review
lease,
or
but we
not.
made an agreement once, not, and, you know, I made
Go back on the
an agreement.
agreement.
Well,
I
how
don't go
about,
back on agreement.
Well, we can't, you have to, if it can't be supported by the people who, want the project, right? We made an agreement based on what we thought we knew, and now we've learned new information. So we have to renegotiate when you find out what you thought you were agreeing to isn't the way that it was.
Well, I knew what I was agreeing to.
and
Take my
I don't think there's
conference.
any new information.
Exactly.
I'm not hearing
What
any
we
new
were agreeing
information.
to.
right,
You didn't already
I
have.
mean, what we're hearing is the information that we agreed to will not result in the projects that we thought it would result in.
Yeah,
So this collection of people agreed on language that protected the public investment by it resulting in public ownership. I mean, public ownership is more flexible than municipal ownership. But I don't see us, making any progress on what you just said. So if you want to talk to your folks and come out with something else, and then in the meantime, we'll talk about it.
Why don't we get this result first?
Okay, well,
Get this result first.
so,
Yes, we made an agreement and, you know, then we were gonna move on to different parts.
okay,
so again,
So-
my purpose in being here, and again, I thank the committee for all of the time, was not frankly expecting to speak. But I'm here trying to provide a little bit more information and more color as we digested the language that was proposed last night. Ultimately, it's the committee's decision to what language you go with. Madam Chair, you suggested municipally owned or leased. I mean, the administration's preference would be municipally supported, as I've said. If you made a tweak in any direction, that would certainly be a broader umbrella than municipally owned. And we would have to see how that would shake out for the projects. I don't think I can, on behalf of the administration, support anything other than what we're proposing. I guess it's.
Well, you're asking us to support something very different than what we proposed and agreed to.
Yeah.
So we would ask the administration to do a little bit of moving. on your end as well, because you're asking us to do all the moving.
Well, I
So I appreciate the administration.
appreciate the
with
Senate,
that.
Madam Chair. I mean, I think the movement that we've made, we love the Senate position on these three.
You've loved that from the beginning, but we were ready to zero it out
Right.
on our side. And we did not zero
Two
it
point
out.
five.
So it'd be great if the administration could budge a little bit and meet us. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've exhausted that.
So let's try to resolve this. Let's take a break. Try to resolve this because that may impact the rest of the negotiations. We've got to resolve this, but we made an agreement.